That's effing sweet.
Hey, what's up, everybody? We are live. Really happy to be live. We don't do this as much anymore. And that's because we save all of our lives for really, really good stuff. And that's what we're doing right here today. I am live with Bailey Fisher from Black Peak. Bailey, what's up? How you doing?
It's going good. It's been a while since we had like a one-on-one chat live stream like this. I think like a big year and a half or so. Lots has changed.
You know, it's been too long. Yeah, a lot has changed, and a lot of web apps are happening. A lot of bigger projects are happening in the space, and that's exactly what we are talking about today. Now, before we get too much into this concept of the future of web apps, where web apps are now, how we're building web apps with Webflow, and what that future looks like, let's say hello to the audience, and let's get where everybody's from. Please give a comment where you are listening from, and I will shout some out. Okay, we have Manny Cortez Studios. Hello from Atlanta. Mike Fenwick, greetings, chat. Yes, hello. Mike Douglas, Scottsdale, Arizona. Duncan Prince from South Africa. We have Samso Studios from Denver. Hello, Eric Unger. How's it going? Sean Duval, great to see you. Rock and Roll CEO from Istanbul. Great.
A lot of people I'm recognizing from office hours and the Wiz Discord. Got a lot of Wiz top end pro users here for sure. This is going to be a good shout. We got 30. Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
When you get into web apps, you kind of get like a little addicted to building web apps, right? You get like deep, just like in Webflow, you kind of learn Webflow and you get deeper and deeper and deeper into Webflow. Same thing happens with web apps, because now you have this amazing power that you can go and create something with, and you want to learn more and more about it. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of normal web appers out there. Wow, what is this? Did we just get one Canadian from Varun? I've never seen this feature before in YouTube.
First live chat donation.
Oh my gosh.
That's hilarious.
Now YouTube is a cash positive resource for us. Great.
There you go. You've made a buck.
Nice. Okay, cool. Let's get into this. Oh, before I start, Finsweet Plus users, tomorrow we have a meeting to talk about the Barcelona trip. We are going to Barcelona Finsweet as a company. All Finsweet Plus users are invited. We are inviting you, and we'll be talking more about web apps there. But let's talk about that right now. Let's start off with, what is a web app? I want everybody in the chat to write what you think a web app is. When you hear that word, what does it mean to you? And Bailey, I want you to answer this. What is a web app to you?
You know, when I think back at Webflow conference last year, their big marketing word was superpowers. And while Webflow is very powerful, I don't know what it would be called the top superpowers, but Wiz and Webflow and Xano as a tech stack and web applications with Webflow, those in my opinion are true superpowers. Like you're saying before, you get addicted to it. It's that feeling of working for hours on a specific API function that and getting to the point where you actually finish it and it's working at the end, that feeling of excitement, that rush of adrenaline, being like, yes, I finally got it working. That contributes to the feeling. And yeah, I think the feeling of web apps is just being able to build, having superpower abilities on the web.
Wow. I love that answer. That superhero. And now from my understanding, about 2 years ago, you really didn't know much about web apps. You were into Webflow, you were just learning this stuff, and then you got into building web apps, and now you are a professional offering web app services, building web apps for clients. you've grown your agency, Black Peak, significantly from this effort. So a little bit about that. Can you talk about that? How, learning web apps was something that you were able to do in the space, and how it's kind of really grown, made you grow in your journey.
So I've always thought about development from a code perspective. And I've been thinking about that ever since I started Webflow 5+ years ago. But there's such a high barrier to entry when it comes to writing code and learning code. Sure, you can take a boot camp and you can get some pretty well-paying jobs with it. But I'm very entrepreneurial myself. I wanted to do something myself and start my own either SaaS company or agency that provides this. And code wasn't really an option for me at that time. And so from there, Platform Wizards came out. And even before that, I was using Zapier, MemberStack, not Outset at that time, but Zapier and MemberStack to kind of hack things together. And it worked a little bit, but it wasn't the best. At that time, Platform Wizards came out. I think this was back in 2019, 2020, just before COVID or so. And I signed up when it was still called Platform Wizards, when it wasn't even out yet. It was in a proper closed beta. And here we are today, Black Peak's 8-9 members strong. And we're building 6-figure plus enterprise scale web applications with it. So we've come a long way. I mean, the community's come a long way. It's a huge community. It's a fantastic community. Everybody's so hungry and driven, and Wiz has just been enabling people to be able to build these fantastic SaaS products and web applications with very limited resources, which I think is a good segue into our next conversation.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love the hungry part.
Yeah.
It's so important. I think one of the key reasons Webflow has grown so significantly in the community aspect is because people are hungry. They're hungry for more work. They're hungry for more knowledge. And when you get to a point where you satisfy that hunger, you understand this skill, you get a little bit more hungry and you want to go to that next level and the next level and the next level. And in my opinion, the next level after Webflow is web apps in Webflow. There's no reason to leave Webflow to build web apps, because Webflow is the best visual building tool for websites. So we don't want to go anywhere, but we just want to do more with the platform. And that hungry part, that's what I love to see in this web app community, that people are hungry to build these apps, and they're hungry to do it on Webflow, which is great. Let's go into the chat here. People have answered the question, what is a web app? And I'd love to read a few of these. Let's go up to an A. Any website that does much more than sales or marketing. Let's go to Mike Fenwick. Web apps provide interactive and dynamic experiences for users, similar to desktop applications, but without the need for installation or device-specific compatibility concerns. Okay. Rock and Roll CEO, a service-specific application that works across devices in a browser. Okay. We have Pierre. Any website that has some sort of backend and or logic that enables its users to do more than just accessing publicly available information. Okay, Rohan, nice and simple, custom functionality. All right. Tim Boyd, a website that provides a service to a user in response to their input. Okay. There's a few good ones. Great from Glenn, from Penny. I'm not going to read anymore. We have a lot to get through in this hour. Yeah, Bailey, what do you have?
I was going to say one thing that Mike said, without the need for installation. I think this is really big moving forward in the web app space. Chrome actually just launched a feature where you can push browser notifications to native iOS devices. So you just download, you add the website as like a bookmark on your homepage, and your API, your site is able to push notifications to your phone that look like they're coming from a native app. And so that just shows that Chrome, Google, the development community is looking to this web app, progressive web app space, and less of an app space. A really good example, I just want to touch on this briefly. A really good example, if you think of OnlyFans. they don't have a physical application on your device, and they've proved that you don't need one to be successful. They're able to run it as a web application. It's super successful. And that just proves that you don't need the high barrier to entry and the marketing power to try and persuade people to download your app when you can just run it as a web app.
That is totally true, right? The web is so efficient, and it's, in my opinion, a little bit easier to build with than the more desktop app approach. And you know what? I don't think you have a successful stream today without mentioning OnlyFans. So I have to applaud you on the OnlyFans drop. It's true though. Big successful company. This is something that you could build with Webflow, which is wild to think about.
Yeah.
You could build an OnlyFans clone with Webflow. That's a good clonable, right?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
That was great.
So now we have some definition of a web app. I'm going to give my definition too. I'd love to. And that is any application, any website that interacts with the user and brings information from one place to another through APIs. That was a little bit of a rough explanation here, but it's really the use of an API and some exchange of information. It could be two-way, it could be one-way, but it's with the user's interaction, with the user's identity, with the user's permission, with the user's action. Some type of exchange of information is happening. And that's how I think of web app, right? If you build a beautiful Webflow site, you implement attribute CMS filter, and it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. I don't see that as a web app, right? It's not just custom functionality. It's some communication to an outside source. That's how I like to think of it. I think everybody's answer was right. That's the great part of it. The world of web apps is really vast. Now, let's get into the future of web apps. Let's start at where we are now, which I want to call traditional development. Anything that is, it's not the new visual development path that we have on Webflow, I like to call traditional development. This is like a React plus Next.js writing code. Now, this is really hard to do. There's a huge barrier to entry when you go to traditional development. Like, yeah, React makes it easier and more accessible to build web applications, but to code a React app, that's a different kind of knowledge. And I think most people in this visual development space don't have that knowledge. And that's okay. I don't have that knowledge. Bailey, do you have that knowledge?
I don't. And that's what I was saying before. It's such a high barrier to entry. It's yeah.
Yeah. It's great that React exists, right? I think there are so many more applications in the world because React exists. And you could say the same thing about WordPress. There's a lot more websites in the world today because of WordPress. That doesn't mean that is the best solution right now to use to build. I think we'll see the same thing with Webflow as we're seeing with the new visual development side of web application development. This idea that a new product, a new way of doing it can drastically increase the amount of applications that are being built, right? There are so many more Webflow sites, so many more websites online because of Webflow, that if Webflow didn't exist, a lot of people wouldn't be in this space and they wouldn't be creating new websites quickly, easily, at good values. And we say the same thing with web apps. With something like Wiz, I think we're going to see so many more web applications being built just because that barrier to entry lessens significantly, that I don't have to learn how to write code to build a web app. I just have to know the concepts around it. I have to know the idea about writing code. So Bailey, can you talk about that? Like this idea of, I don't know how to code, but I know how to build web apps through a product. How does that feel?
I definitely can't speak about that. But before, we have 100 viewers in the chat here. which is
Oh,
fantastic. I know do we have one? There we go. That's what I was looking for.
we do.
I like it. So even with Wiz 2.0, the new embed that's coming out, we mentioned writing code. Wiz, the 1.0 of the embed, you don't have to write too much code. It's very logic based, which I appreciate. Starting out with Make and Zapier and Integromat, Integromat now known as Make, people are very used to building with logic. And even the more simpler, just building with a drag and drop. But Wiz is that sweet little, it's in a very unique position because it's not just drag and drop. Sure, there are components of drag and drop with tools like Xano, but Wiz allows you to really build custom logic and doesn't restrain you from a drag and drop interface. And now with Wiz 2.0, with the new embed that's coming out, you can build custom code. I would bet money that React developers, I know that are my friends, are going to look at Wiz 2.0 and say, why didn't I build that for this little small job? I have proper developers. When I go to WeWork, I have proper developers that look at the work I do and they say, wow, like you've built that way faster than I could. Now, sure, there are situations where this tech stack might not be ideal, but as these tools progress, those situations and those scenarios are becoming less and less frequent as we move forward. With Wiz 2.0, the embed, you can write custom code if you wish, or you don't have to if you don't want to. It gives you the power where now expert React developers, expert programmers can use the platform, as well as beginners can use the platform. So it's opening up the world to, it's opening up Wiz and this tech stack to a much bigger community.
And that's a beautiful thing to be able to appeal to so many people. Webflow does this so well. And Webflow is suitable for a tiny florist in a local town with 500 people, right? The smallest little flower shop that you could think of would be a great candidate for Webflow. Also, a publicly traded company with 10,000 employees is also a great candidate for Webflow. And that's amazing, right? That's a beautiful thing, that something that builds for the web is accessible by these two different people. So if we can achieve that same thing with web apps in a visual space, that's great. Being able to say, hey, beginners, we're good over here. Simple apps, we're good over here.
Mm-hmm.
Big apps, we're also good over here. We can do this. So,
and
yeah.
One thing to add on to that, with Wiz, as I was saying, beginners can use it, experts can use it. But if you think of DevLink, recently announced by Webflow at their last conference last year, really surprised us all, honestly. I remember I was sitting next to Jonas and I looked over at him and I was like, whoa, like what, this is crazy. And it's super, super powerful. React developer can now go in and say, look, client's Webflow website is already on Webflow. I know React. Let's merge them together and quickly build something. It's great. But when you don't know code, when you're that beginner to kind of medium user on Wiz or with web apps in general, DevLink's just a touch out there. It's a little too complex for your average user. And that's where we kind of come into these other applications. You have Bubble, WeWeb, I know Adalo for all these other web application situations. And they're popular. They're really popular. Bubble's large. I mean, I remember using Bubble back when they didn't have a responsive engine. Those are the good days. Those are the good days. And Joe, did you use Bubble at all? Did you try it out?
I didn't. No, I didn't.
That probably
that was too much. I wasn't even looking at web apps in the beginning. I was just looking for simple marketing sites. So Bubble never came across.
Mm-hmm. But this is the thing. You have Bubble, WeWeb, Adalo, all these other web app tools. But if you think about it, those tools, they focus or necessarily lack the focus of a specific niche. They try to do the development and they do the design. They do the front end and the back end. Plus they have a plugin marketplace. In my opinion, I feel that those platforms are stretching themselves too thin. which is a very great example of why I'm here, why I follow this tech stack religiously. Webflow, Wiz, Xano, in my opinion, is the best because you have Webflow. It's just the best for design. It's hands down the best front end, low code, WYSIWYG web design builder out there right now, hands down.
Yeah, totally.
On top of that, you have clients. Maybe the clients already are using Webflow. And you come to them and say, no worries. We can just build this web app on top of your Webflow site. You don't have to retrain your team on another platform. Everything will be the same. Plus, they have a proven track record with enterprise. Webflow's got front end down pat. On top of that, you have Xano, you have Supabase, you have Airtable, these back-end database solutions, which are infinitely scalable. We have an application that runs over 300,000 API calls a month through Xano alone. And they're using Xano Enterprise. They got their white glove service. It's infinitely scalable. And that's what we use for our backend. And they solely focus on the backend. They make the API calls work. They make the database work. It's a dream. And then in the middle, you have Wiz. It fosters all the communications, all the connections between all these different companies, between Webflow and Airtable or Webflow and Xano. And it just ties everything together. And you have this dream tech stack where all these ideally 3 companies are working on their own products, making them perfect. And you come together and you build a fantastic tool with them.
That focus is important. That was so well said, in that if you don't focus on something, you spread yourself too thin. And that's why Bubble is not huge. Bubble could be the biggest thing to hit the web if it had the front end building capabilities like Webflow, but it doesn't. And that's because they do everything, right? You can build everything in Bubble. But the reason why we are in Webflow, the reason why you're watching this stream, is because Webflow is the best in the front end side of it. There's nothing better. We have not found anything better. That's why we are all using Webflow. So let's bring up this question, and I want to talk through this from Matt T. Is there a disadvantage to using so many different stacks versus, say, Bubble that has more plug and play? Well, using a stack lets you pick the best aspects of each part of the web application. And just to say web application, there's so many parts to that. There's the backend. There's the framework that communicates with that backend. There is the front end that makes it look a certain way. And for one product to do everything, that's really tough. That is never how development has worked. Right? It's you've never heard in the past like, oh, we built this entire giant large scale app on one platform. It just doesn't work like that. You have React stacks that with other things in React. You have all PHP stacks, and there's a stack with PHP. You have to do that because you need that specialization if you want the best of the best. We want the best web apps. We don't want web apps that are just okay, that get the job done. We want the best. So we need that stack to hand select everything.
If you think about it, it's very rare that a web application that is built from code uses one library or uses one framework, right? You look at all these web applications that are built, and they use a wide variety of tools specific to what they're looking to accomplish. They don't just use one framework, one language. Most times they might use one language, but they don't just use one framework, one library, right? If you're building a Webflow, typically, if you're building a more advanced site, you're not just going to use one JavaScript library. You might use a couple of Finsweet attributes. You might use swiper.js. You might use chart.js. You're adding in all these libraries, all these frameworks to get the ideal solution, because chart.js focuses on charts, right? Swiper.js focuses on sliders. There's a huge benefit to using specifically what you need and piecing them together. Sure, there's a small learning curve to each product that you use, but I think that's natural with web development. And I think one of the reasons that's not a huge concern is because of the drive and because of the just pure motivation that low code developers and low code designers have to getting the job done, trying new tools, and accomplishing and solving their solution or their problem.
Yeah, accomplishing that solution, that's key. When a client asks you to do something, you don't want to always go back and say, no, I can't do it. No, I can't do it. After enough, no, I can't do it, they will work with somebody else. They're not going to keep working with a company, an agency, a freelancer that always says, nope, I can't do it. And when you work on a platform that does everything, you run into more, nope, I can't do it. Because naturally, if a company focuses on too many things, they won't be able to do certain things very well. So there's limitations there. So there's more, nope, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So by specializing, like you said, it's going to help.
Pierre de Montale mentioned, picking your stack instead of an all-in-one solution can help you pick the best and most suited solution for each aspect of your web app. It's 100% true. You're able to pick each specific solution to your problem that you're trying to solve. And Wiz helps you tie everything together. Xano helps you tie everything together. It's a dream when it comes true. When you're at the end of the project and everything's working and you look at the site and you sit back and you're like, wow, this is not Make. This is not Zapier. This is Wiz.
Feels good. Let's bring up a question from Lowfully. Lowfully asks, can I host React code native on Webflow? Well, no. You can't host React code on Webflow. And I would say, generally speaking, building a React app on Webflow was not a good approach. With DevLink, this now becomes an acceptable approach. This is something you can do. So Lowfully, go check out DevLink. It's a way to build components in Webflow and then send those components to your React project, which is not hosted in Webflow. So it's good. The problem with DevLink is you still have to code, right? So if you write React code, if you are a JavaScript developer, this is great news for you if you're already building React apps, if this is your business. But if you don't know React, if you don't know how to write JavaScript, this is not very helpful to us. If we want to build web apps, I want to build a web app. I don't care if other people build web apps. I want to build one. So I need a platform that I can actually go and learn that and build it. So now let's get into the visual development side of it. Let's talk a little bit about Make. Let's talk a little bit about Zapier. Let's talk about Wiz. So Bailey, in your experience, going from an agency that was mostly doing design, 3D work, like you were doing wild, cool, designy websites, and then you made the transition to web apps. Did you go through Make? Did you test that out? Did you go through Zapier? How was that? And how do those relate to a dedicated solution like Wiz, which is really dedicated in building a web app with a backend?
So everybody's used Zapier, or at least most people have used Zapier. And I highly recommend it. It gets the job done. We still use Zapier today for specific use cases, more so internal automation work, as that's what it's built for. And it's fantastic at that. Make also a little bit more advanced than Zapier, fantastic as well. But when you start to combine it with Webflow, you're very limited into what you can do. Webflow exposes their CMS API, so you're able to access that, and you can control and make queries and changes to Webflow's CMS via Zapier and via Make. But you're limited. Say someone on your website submits a form submission. That then gets sent to Zapier. Zapier manipulates that data somehow, and you can send it back to the CMS. That whole process is going to take a couple seconds, maybe 5, 7, even 10 seconds for the whole process to happen. And on top of that, the user has to now refresh the page to be able to see any data or navigate to the next page to be able to see any data that they're wanting to edit. I started in this tech stack. When I first started web applications, we use this, and we used MemberStack, and we built dashboards and portals, and they worked to a degree. But if you're okay waiting 5, 7, 10 seconds for the page to load and a non-ideal user experience, that was the tech stack you were using back in 2019, 2020 or so. Now this brings us to Wiz. And I wanted to mention, there was a comment up in the chat here. Kaizen said Wiz versus Xano comparison. I want to clarify, Wiz and Xano aren't the same. Wiz is an API communication tool. It allows you to tie a front end with a back end. And this is a big issue that we ran into when we were using Make and Zapier. There wasn't a tool that allowed you to render the content directly on page. Sure, you can use JavaScript to do that. You can make an API call with JavaScript. Then when you return the data, you render the content on page by selecting the item in the DOM. But that requires code, and not that many people are familiar with that approach. So while that exists, it's not ideal. This is why Wiz is here. Wiz replaces that need for building JavaScript and connecting APIs manually with code on your front end. Wiz versus Xano. With Xano, you build your API calls, you build your databases, and then you get your API URL, paste it in Wiz, build out your function, and select the data you want to replace or render over top of on Webflow. And it replaces the data, and it all happens in fractions of milliseconds. I'm not joking. I looked, when I first got beta access to Embed 2.0, I did a speed test of an API call with the current client site, and then we copied it over and put it on Embed 2.0, 17 times faster. That's not an exaggeration, 17 times faster. And granted, with Wiz 1.0, I think it was maybe 300 milliseconds. And with this, it was 17 times faster than that. So probably like 40 milliseconds, maybe even less, 30 milliseconds to load. It was really fast. And that removes all flickering. It's a dream. It's a dream. And so on top of that, like I said, you start with Make, you start with Zapier. They're okay. They get the job done for automation. But if you want true web app capabilities, you use a stack like Webflow, Wiz, and Xano or Superbase, and they just attach everything together in a proper, seamless way. Do you want to add on to that, Joe?
Well, I don't think either of those tools were really made
That's true.
as frameworks for rendering content on the page. So they're great products. It's just we're trying to use them for something that they're not made for. Like Zapier, like you said, is a great tool. We use Zapier as well for internal automations. I believe that's really what it's made for. It's not made for real-time communication. And same goes for Make, right? You can do that, but that's not really the goal. So that's why picking that stack, really defining the best services to get the job done, lets you focus on those companies that are focused on providing a certain service. We have a lot of comments. We've been so deep in our conversation here that we really haven't looked at them. Is there anything that you want to bring up? I see a little bit about people asking going into the App Store. We can bring that up. Okay, so we have, who asked this first? I think Frank. Frank, does an app, okay, yes, this one. Does an app built with Webflow and Wiz, will that be accepted in the App Store and the Play Store? Well, I'm not very experienced with these kind of stores, but from my understanding, there are wrappers available for literally anything that you want to do. You could turn a website into a desktop app. You can turn a website into a mobile app, iOS store. You can do that with this conversion tool. The problem is it's not going to be very efficient. That's my understanding of the drawback of that. So yeah, you can build an app that will do all the things you need to do, but it's not going to be that snappy, really nice native iOS or Android development.
You have this brings me to a larger picture question that I deal with maybe perhaps on a daily basis. I have a client. This is the hypothetical story. We have clients that come to us and they say, I want to build a mobile app with Wiz and Webflow. This is my budget. How can we do it? 9 times out of 10, actually probably 10 times out of 10, I tell them it's an awful idea. And the reason I tell them it's an awful idea is because sure, you have, X amount of thousands of dollars to build this application. Do you have the money to market it on the App Store? Do you have the money to persuade people to take up that precious screen real estate on their phone with your app? Are you able to compete with Twitter, now X, Instagram, Spotify? Are you able to compete with the screen real estate on these apps? If no, I would recommend a web app. And so you have these questions of, I want to use Wiz, I want to use Webflow, I want to build a mobile app with it. Do you really? Because are you going to get the same amount of traction that you might get with a web app? Are you able to market it the same that you will with the top 100 apps in the App Store? If the answer is no, you want to go to a web app. We have all these people, and typically they're not. I just get asked this question a lot of, I want to build a mobile app. And I always say, do you really? And I bring them back to the OnlyFans example. OnlyFans did it without a mobile app. You can too.
OnlyFans now twice. This is a record. This is a new record.
It's just, I don't think there's a better story that proves the point that you don't need a mobile app.
It's a great use case. It's a relatively simple application with massive scale and massive appeal. The shareability on the web is so much better than the shareability of native applications. That goes for desktop, that goes for mobile, whatever. Shareability on the web, community on the web, it's a different game. So there has to be a really good reason why you want to build a mobile app, not just to charge your clients lots of money for it. I think that's a great way to answer, Bailey, really challenging the client and saying, is this really what you want? Or do you just want a really good mobile experience on a website, right? You can build a mobile website to look just like an app. That doesn't mean it needs to be wrapped in a native wrapper and then posted in a store.
And to add on to that, with Webflow design only, the client, the questions they ask, you're able to service them to a certain degree because I'm trying to think about what I'm trying to say. When you have clients come to you in Webflow, they have access to the designer. They think, oh, I could just build it like this. Why can't you build it like this? Or can we build it like this? I think I could do it, or I think I could hire someone cheaper to do it on Webflow. Why can't we do it like this? But when it comes to web apps, it's a little bit different because you have a responsibility to advise your client on the best approach for a certain problem. And with the designer and with Webflow, it's a little harder somehow to get that traction with the client. It's a little harder to say, actually, it might be better to do it this way because they feel like they can edit it in the designer. They feel like they can change it easily. But one thing I always recommend to people in the web app space and with people with this tech stack is push your client in the right direction and push harder than you might normally do. Because if you know what you're doing and you've used this tech stack before, you're going to get people to ask you, why can't we do it like this? Why can't we do it like this? Push them in the right direction. Push them in building proper API calls, proper database structure. Because down the road, if they're exposing an API that they didn't care about at the beginning or they didn't have the budget to fully do properly, they're exposing an API call down the road, that could be a huge, huge issue. And you don't have these dramatic, these very large issues in the designer because it's just a static site. You're not exposing potentially private user data. You don't have the ability to expose that in Webflow as a designer, but with this web application, you have a much higher degree of responsibility. And so I would say because you have such a higher degree of responsibility, push your clients in the right direction to make the right decision, advise them and push them in the right direction.
That is good advice for selling anything. I don't care what you're selling, that advice works. Push them in the right direction with that transparency and honesty. It's the same thing for Webflow. If a client comes to us with Webflow and they they have the wrong idea about their project, or they're requesting things that really shouldn't be done, we are going to advise them. We are that consultant. This consultant role becomes incredibly more important when you move to web apps.
Mm-hmm.
So when you become a web app developer, you are now offering web app services, and your consultation, your experience, your recommendations are incredibly important, maybe for the entire business. It can make a massive impact for if that company succeeds or does not succeed. Marketing site, yeah, these are also very important decisions. But when you're dealing with that data, that potentially sensitive data, that data that powers the entire revenue source, that requires special care. So going back to the title of this, the future of web apps, I think a lot of web app development is just going to be proper planning, right? That I have an idea for a web app. I'm going to hire a company, and this company is going to lead me in the right direction to
Mm-hmm.
how I can build this web app. That is challenging, and I think that's how people can get into the industry. If you can explain to that client how to go from my idea to a finished published web application, you are doing most of the work. You're getting that sale, you're starting a new service, and you are going to build a web application. Most of it's planning. Bailey, tell me about planning. I want to hear. You've built more web applications for Webflow than any other company I know, even more than Finsweet. Is impressive.
Joe
The
told me
amount of
this.
web apps that Black Peak is pushing out, it is so impressive.
Joe
So
told me
tell
this
me
the other
about
day.
that.
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah. You told me about this the other day in private, and I was like, "No way, you're lying."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a learning curve for sure. Our process of planning applications, and the application I'm about to show you all here, it's a long time. The buy cycle for web applications is much longer than normal Webflow projects, but there's a reason for that, a very good reason for that. For example, Stay World Class, a project that we built a couple months ago now, took us about, I want to say, a month to 2 months to scope alone. Just for the scoping, we used FigJam and many calls, many hours on calls, scoping, figuring out what it's going to be like, how it's going to be built. It's no joke. We just signed a contract for another project as well, even larger than Stay World Class. Again, another month and a half, 2 months of scoping alone. The statement of work in our contract is 4 pages long. Just for the statement of work, just the detailing the services of what we're going to offer. It's 4 pages long. The rest of the contract's like another 20 pages or so. So that shows how much scoping is really required for these web applications, because in our scoping, you're planning out every single API call you're making and what data that API call is going to manipulate, and what users are going to have, what data the users are able to see, any conditional logic. It gets so complex, so fast. The biggest and the best thing I can say is scope your projects well and don't rush things.
And this is such a serious service, this consulting, this strategizing, because clients come to us and say, I want to build a booking site. I want somebody to be able to select a date, book it, and then they have checkout, right? And this is such an easy process for the end user. So the client may think, well, this is an easy process. I choose the date, I book the thing, and now I get my confirmation email. Do you know how many questions are needed just to do that relatively simple string of events? Choose a date, make sure it's available, book the person, have them in the reservation, send the email. Incredibly challenging, or I should say more challenging than the client is thinking about. So
Yes.
people come with ideas, and we really need to break them down as the consultants, as
Mm-hmm.
the knowledgeable people who are building the web application. So yeah.
So if we bring it to that, your client comes to you, I want to build a booking application. Okay, great. but you have questions. What are these questions? If we go to my screen share here, we'll see I am on the Stay World Class website here. It's a pretty normal site. It's a pretty normal booking site, but we see we have pay monthly and we have pay in full. There's two options now, not just one. Okay, we want to pay in full. Now we have to select our dates. Okay, but wait, actually the client says we need to make it so clients can only book a minimum of 30 days. Okay, sure, we can do that. Select that 30-day minimum stay. Oh, but now the other question is, what JavaScript library do we use for the calendar? That's another question we have to ask. Now we have to ask, okay, are we just booking the dates, or are we charging anything else on top of that? Are we charging a cleaning fee? Are we charging add-ons? Turns out we're charging a couple add-ons. Then we have to figure out, okay, does the client want to use Stripe checkout and redirect them to an external checkout page? Or do we want to use Stripe elements and have checkout directly on page here? On top of this, with all the calculations you see here, it's a lot of work. It's not just, I want to build a booking app. It's, okay, are we syncing with a third-party tool, the actual bookings? Are we syncing with Airbnb? Are we syncing with Vrbo? What payment tool do you want to use? It's a bazillion questions to actually get down to the nitty-gritty and the final product here. But it's super powerful once you get done. And look at this. You can enter your credit card details right on page with Stripe elements. It's so clean. And confirm booking, one click. After a second, it goes to the dashboard and we can see the booking. It's fantastic.
Amazing.
So, Joe, one of the questions, we can stop the share screen here. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, this all sounds great. Xano sounds great. Webflow sounds great. Wiz sounds great. But I don't know how to manage database. I being the client. I don't know how to manage the database. I don't want to break anything. I don't want to mess anything up after you guys' hard work for months on this project. What do we do about that? I could segue myself into this, but we use a tool called Retool for this. And so if you go back to my screen share, Retool allows us to build custom dashboards for admin viewers only. This allows the admin to go in and say, hey, we have a product. It's called Bailey Fish. Let's finish the last name there and call it Bailey Fisher and click save. That just made an API called Xano, and it's done. And it's live in the database right there. Retool allows us, and it allows the client peace of mind that they're not going to break anything. It allows them to build a fully custom dashboard, and I can go and edit this. I can drag and drop any sort of, if I just adjust this window quickly, I can drag and drop any sort of input, module, component, whatever you'd like to call them. I can drag and drop anything onto the screen here. And even the client could do this once they know what they're doing with this product here. But the power of Retool and what's possible here, the user can go in, they can see all their products. They can see any items in the warehouse that are ready to be picked and shipped. They can create new products directly on page here with Retool. So they don't have to go into the Xano database. They don't have to manipulate any APIs. They have a fun, easy WYSIWYG editor to be able to manage their backend. And it's not hard to do. This dashboard that you're looking at here, it's 4 pages. We got warehouse, admin, sales. I built this in about 4 hours. It's that fast to build.
That is very cool that the client can't break something, right? That's always a huge concern in our industry, no matter what you're building, that the client accidentally updates something. So using this idea of specialization, really choosing a tool to help us do a certain part of this web app, it's a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. That's so nice to see that really nice dashboard for a client. And yeah, that's I want to bring up, Derek Jensen. How do you address the concern of platform risk? So if we're choosing all of our different tools, what happens if one of those tools goes down? What's the platform risk for choosing any kind of platform in our stack? Well, I think that risk is no matter what tool we use. If we're building in React by hand, if we're building in Webflow, if we're building with third-party tools, No matter what it is, there is always a risk that somebody builds it and then there is a problem afterwards with some type of maintenance. Company goes down, React developer goes away, and you can't find another good React developer to come in. There's always risk. So it's a simple answer, but make sure you trust the company, right? If it's some random company you found online, you don't know anything about them, you don't know how motivated they are to continue this app, it's dangerous. But if you like the company, if you trust in the company, for me, that's when I say go for it.
It should really be translated to company risk. There's risk with everything in business. It just depends on how much risk you're happy with.
That's a great way to put it. That's really nice. And what type of risk, right? If you go with no platforms and you do the whole thing yourself, you hire traditional development team, they build you a custom app, there is a huge risk in not being able to maintain that or having issues and not having somebody go and be able to fix that. Where when you piece together a few different tools, when something breaks, you should be able to go find a freelancer. No matter what you're building with, you should be able to find a freelancer that can help you. So yeah, that's that I like your answer.
From what I'm seeing in my Wizzed office hours that I host twice weekly, there are plenty of Wizzed freelancers that are capable of taking on projects, small fixes. There are plenty of them. You're in good hands with this platform. It's just growing. Think about how powerful and capable the Webflow community is. And now you have a subset of extreme giga users. Those people use Wizzed. That's how in good hands you are.
I think that comes down to the education. And we have about 5 minutes left. We're going to end this conversation with education, because really everybody that's listening now is on some type of journey in their professional career. You're not just listening to this stream just because you feel like listening to it. You're on some journey, right? You may want to keep your business equal. You may want to grow your business. You may want to change your business. You may want to learn something new. In my opinion, the web app route is the way for you to take that next step in education. Once you know everything, or what seems like everything to know about Webflow, you have an urge to go and do something else, right? If you know how to use Canva for design, you may have an urge to go and try Photoshop. You have an urge of building these marketing sites, and then you want to take the next step. And what is that? I think it's web apps. And the reason I think it's web apps is we don't really know how they work, right? So many people in Webflow don't know web apps. It's like this mysterious world. Just like when you came into Webflow for the first time, it felt like this mysterious world, and then you figured it out, and that feeling is so amazing. I think that same thing happens with web apps, with Wizzed, that you go in, you don't know what the heck is going on, but then you learn it. It feels good. And now you have this new knowledge inside of you, and it just feels good on a professional career. And Bailey, I think you are the ideal person that followed this path, because you came from nothing. No, you came from no knowledge about web apps.
Yeah,
and now you're a true pro.
Yeah.
So how does that feel? Can you talk about that feeling of growing in knowledge?
A great metaphor. Learning is very natural for humans, and there's always a drive to learn and be better at what it is that you're doing. I've been rock climbing a lot lately, and getting higher than you did the last time, or completing a certain climb, you get that rush of adrenaline, of excitement, of I did it. You get that with Webflow as a designer. You're like, wow, I built this really cool site. But with Webflow and with Wiz and with Xano, with web applications, that excitement, that rush is times 100. It's fantastic. It's amazing what you can build. It's opens up so many doors because you're designing just in Webflow statically. Client comes to you and they have specific needs for web, but maybe you don't know, the doors were closed a couple of years ago. Now they're open. Now you can reach those higher levels. And that's exactly why I'm positioning Black Peak, my agency, in the direction that we're going, is because there's so much potential here. This is the early days of Wiz. There's not that many. I actually don't know how many users there are, but there's not as many as React. That's for sure. Right? This is the early days of Wiz. You can still get in. You can still try it out, build web apps, build your own SaaS product. This is, in my opinion, for the next foreseeable future, the way to build your own SaaS product.
And there's going to be more and more people wanting to build SaaS products. 10 years ago, the entrepreneurship in the world was not as strong. Today, I think it's much stronger with the web and how we can share things and how people get inspired by other people. People want to have their own business. And maybe it's not their primary thing, right? It could be something on the side, right? I have my full-time job. I love it, but I have this little thing on the side. And then the thing on the side becomes really valuable, and then it's a full-time business. I think there's more people starting businesses now than ever before. And this is, I don't know if this is a true fact. I'm just saying this. It just feels like that. Yeah. And with that, I think there's going to be a higher demand for web apps, because as you want to start your business, there needs to be usually some web application attached to it. If you're doing something in tech, you got to have a web app to do something. So I think that the requirements will also, people will want more of them. There'll be a growing industry of people asking for web applications.
To sum it up, I believe the future of work is contract work. The future of work is entrepreneurial, contract-based. You own your own work that you do, and you can get there with this tech stack, with Webflow, Wiz, and Xano. It will allow you to make that push to contract-based work, because that's how I think the future is going in terms of general work everywhere.
Absolutely. This was a great stream. I really enjoyed this. We talk web apps. Great watch count. Thank you everybody for watching. If you liked this video, give us a thumbs up, share it with a friend, tell YouTube that you like it, throw a comment in after this is pushed live. I just want to thank everybody for the support, for watching this, for listening, all the Wiz users out there. Thank you so much for helping us grow this platform. And I am so excited to see how this helps the community grow, to watch people like you, Bailey, go from level 1 to level 10. And if we can multiply that feeling, if we can multiply those results, we are going to be successful. And that's exciting. That's the best part about business, that everybody can reach success. We can reach success. You can reach success. The community reaches success. Wonderful. Bailey, final words. What do you want to tell people? And you know what? Bailey was great today. Let's also give him like 30 seconds for a little bit of self-promotion. Where should people go to check you out?
Blackpeak.ca. If you're looking for a web app, check out blackpeak.ca. Check out finsweet.com. Those are, if you're looking for a large web application, even a medium-sized one, that's where to go. If you need help with Wiz, I run a twice weekly office hours. It's 1 hour each. You can join for free for the first week. Check it out. Join us. We have one later today. I think it's like in 3 hours. We have one later today. It's free. You can join it. Check it out. It helps a lot. Typically we have a couple people on it. It's a mastermind of Wiz users. Highly recommend blackpeak.ca Wiz office hours. And thank you, Joe. It's been a great time. I know we're not talking at the same Webflow Conf this year coming up, but we have our own separate talks, and I'll be cheering for you from San Francisco for that.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Bailey. Thank you, community. This was the future of web apps, and we are excited to see what you go and build. Have a great rest of the day, and thanks for watching.